Hi, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for showing up. I am really excited about this first episode. I got to have a conversation with Jaze Uries. He's a local Asheville musician. He is one of those folks, part of my plan for devoting myself to music and learning more and taking lessons and practicing and all that was to also go and see as much live music as I could. Just lucky enough to find Jaze was one of the regular musicians playing here weekly at 5 Walnut Wine Bar, downtown Asheville. And quickly became one of those folks, as a drummer, you just watch and listen to, and you can learn a ton. And then just started chatting with him between sets one night, and he was just so open and welcoming and easy to talk to that we built rapport very quickly. And he was even one of the first people I talked to about the podcast that was outside of my usual circle of trust, and he thought it was a good idea and was accommodating and was my first guest ever. So and it definitely set a high bar. So I'm really excited about this one. I've learned a lot from Jaze, watching him and having those conversations with him, and this one that I've recorded. But just some of the things that we cover in this, starting drums at a young age, the pressures and benefits of cutting your teeth as a drummer in a gospel church, other influences for him, Questlove to Dave Grohl, Stanton Moore, Jaze, like so many varied influences there. Perfectionism, fear of failure, criticism, humility, meeting heroes, human connection, renewal, stretching yourself, staying true to your sensibilities, the pressures of the sonic and acoustic responsibility as a drummer. You drummers that have gigged on stage know what that's about, or in a studio or any kind of situation where you've played with other people. Role of substances in the music world, finding a voice as a drummer, producer, singer, lyricist. You can see him, like I said, Mondays at 5 Walnut Wine Bar, downtown Asheville, with a pretty incredible lineup of other musicians. You can also catch him DJing at Ben's Tune-Up. He really develops and curates a unique blend of music, a lot of deep cuts, stuff you probably haven't heard before, so definitely worth checking that out too. He's been producing his own music and actually just dropped a new single yesterday called Twice. Definitely check it out on Spotify. He's searchable all over YouTube. You just type in his name, which will be spelled in the description, Jaze Uries, and you'll find him there, playing with all different kinds of music and whatnot. But yeah, so. Oh, and you can also follow him on Instagram as well, and I'll put the link in the bio. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube and rate the podcast and let me know what you think. All right, enjoy.
Even though I had been, I was hiatus from playing mainly for people, I just want to play for myself.
When was this? When were you hiatus?
That started right before COVID. I guess I actually, no lie, had made the decision, and then the following weekend everything shut down, and I was like, well, that was really good. And I had been sitting with it for some months, and then that's what happened, and I decided not to, and then I had all this time to kind of really process what that meant, and so that was really cool. And so jumping into this space and knowing that I did want to be my own drummer for the most part. I love programming stuff too, and using samples for sure. But
when did you get it? How long have you been into the programming and sampling?
I actually started sampling when I was in high school.
Okay.
A lot, and programming drums, Fruity Loops. I'm talking about Fruity Loops, and how that's how I learned to program, was kind of in a sequencer kind of vibe. And so learning to do that, and which is cool but can be really robotic.
Right.
So I knew I've always like with producing music, honestly, the majority has been programmed or sampled in some form. But now I'm what I'm currently working on is there's gonna be way more love to the drums because I kind of like hated drums for a minute, to be honest.
Like just before pandemic, you kind of got sick of it.
I got sick of it. I was burnt out. Some relationships were suffering, and then it was some personal drama got caught up into my business life, and then that was like it all kind of influenced each other, and it just got messy. And I was like, oh man, you know what? I think for myself and to not I was actually playing music with some really close friends of mine, and there was we had a meeting, and it got a little heated, and some words were said that hurt my feelings, and geared around toward songwriting and things of that nature. But it really like launched me into this like place of how I wanted to be perceived for myself, and what my like everyone knew me as Jazz the drummer. Like, Jazz is drumming. He's like this drummer, dope drummer, drums for everybody.
Right.
So it's like,
and you were in Asheville already.
Okay. I was here, and I really, I would consider had a very successful time here playing with so many people, incredible musicians.
Well, let's back up. 'Cause this is all good stuff. But I kind of like, and I know a little bit about you. I mean, we've chatted very little, but I've also watched the podcast you were on, Making It in Asheville.
Yeah, right.
That was a great, like that was a great foundation for like
cool
where I want to go. They asked a lot of great questions, and y'all engaged well. But so you grew up in Greenville.
Yes.
Okay, child of the 80s.
Oh
90s.
yeah.
Or maybe more you're a child of the 90s, right? Like
yeah.
You were born in the 80s?
Kind of, but really love the 80s.
Sure.
I feel as connected to that as I do the 90s.
Okay.
In a strange way.
Okay.
Probably my cousin, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. Older cousin, yeah. Introduced you to the popular stuff that was going on in the 80s?
Yeah, a lot of
like
it.
Like what?
Like some like Toto. I think, is that like Duran? Right? Oh, yeah, for sure. Phil, a lot of Phil.
Oh, yeah.
So he was always like a peculiar person. Like, one of the strangest people I've ever known in my life. Love him like a brother, though. And so.
How much older?
Quite a bit. Let me see. Probably like more than that. Maybe 20 years.
Oh wow. Okay. So, but lived close to you.
Yeah. Yes. He lived with us for a period of time.
Okay.
Yeah. He was like several months or something. I think he's. Yeah.
You gotta have.
It's so great.
Yeah. It's like that mentor.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
To introduce you to music and
yes,
what's cool.
Definitely was that. As I'm really thinking about it, I haven't really thought about that honestly.
Okay.
But yeah, he was very much integral to my development as a musician, for sure.
Does he play?
He does. He plays drums. I think he plays some keys as well.
You got a musical family.
He was in a band. Yeah, yeah,
yep.
Yeah. My mom sang. She directed choir, and so I would play drums. Yeah, I grew up very religious and heavily in the church.
In what church?
It was called Holiness, a Holiness Church.
Okay.
Which is very similar to Pentecostal.
Okay.
And so very exciting.
Yeah.
Very charismatic. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, but this is in Greenville.
This is in Greenville. Yeah, South Carolina.
So I was just watching The Summer of Love.
Great.
Questlove, right?
Yeah.
So Jesse Jackson
was
like the Reverend that came in on that and spoke and not really proselytized, but helped people try to gain some context. It's such a it's a genius move to compile that movie together and put it together for people. Like you just don't understand sometimes the healing nature of music, but also sometimes like the distraction from everything that was going on. But he, they brought him on and everyone else to not let it be the distraction, but to be kind of a conduit, right? Like a healing process, a community kind of.
It was. Yeah, that movie is dope. Yeah, like it's so informative. I learned so much. Yeah, and just gained a lot of context. Yeah, for some things too. And how something like that could easily have gotten glossed over. Yeah, I played to a lot of Roots albums
Oh,
when I
nice.
was in like high school and stuff, and that was how I practiced. Is I would
Uh-huh.
turn hip hop and gospel up full blast in my headphones and just
Okay.
go crazy over the top or like play whatever. But yeah, Questlove is on my number one person that I would love to meet. I worked at Guitar Center for a hot minute, and so there were some things that were coming out at the time. And Stanton Moore is one of the
Oh,
drummers
yeah,
that I
yeah.
was like really hooked on for a minute. But he had this dope like DVD, I forget what it was called, but
Uh-huh.
man, I had it on repeat in the drum department like all the time because the music was great, but the ideology behind it was greater. And like talking about Zigaboo
Yeah.
and like how a lot of that stuff kind of where it came from, or at least I went and like looked where it came from and what was going on. And it's, I mean, it. I just found myself just obsessed. I kind of do that with some
Mm-hmm.
things sometimes, and I would like wanted to practice all those grooves and all those rhythms for a hot minute, and I did it like so solid, probably 6 months or something, and just like that's all I kind of was interested in for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just kind of programmed into me in different kinds of ways, and kind of referencing when you're talking about when I'm thinking when I'm playing, and it's like it goes into that pool of information that kind of gets pulled from.
It's there. It's
It's
always
there,
there, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's all. Yeah. Like, in the way, like that, anyone from that region,
Mm-hmm.
like the music's so communal, right?
Yeah.
Like Trombone Shorty was talking about how on a podcast I listened to a while ago, just about how like in his neighborhood, like there are instruments just floating around from house to house.
Oh man, that's cool. Yeah.
Like, and that's how, people would find their instrument. It's just like it would just kind of jump around and like you'd play whatever for whatever time.
Yeah.
And like the way that he described it was like, yeah, there'd be some criticisms and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but it was all with love and it was all encouraging. And it was just like, just, you're fine, keep going,
Right.
and it would just, and I love that. Like, it was just so much more community oriented.
Mm-hmm.
You grew up very religious in
Uh-huh.
Greenville, South Carolina.
Right.
Mom's a choir director. Music's incredibly important,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Yeah.
in that community.
Yeah, for sure. Especially like being born and raised in the South.
Right.
And that's like, Bible Belt. It's really intense, and that relationship, especially like just black people in general and like church and like that whole the culture around that and where it comes from and how singing, how it relates to us, and like drumming and rhythm relates to us as a people. And so like that it feels like it was all so tightly interwoven into my like musical religious upbringing and like all of the senses around that. And yeah, you're right, the identity excuse me, like a lot of identity, at least my personal experience with that, was tied up. Like even going to school, I was always talking about being at church because I was at church so much as a kid, like literally sometimes like 6 days a week. It was like always there was something going on and I was probably there doing whatever was being done. And so that was kind of all I really knew musically. And I can remember the first time, not the first time hearing jazz, but the first time really having a conversation about jazz music. And I was much older than most people, I would imagine. And maybe that's an assumption, but
How old?
I was around, I'm pretty sure 16 or 17,
Okay.
maybe. I think because
Older before you got into jazz.
yeah,
So
or
like,
any kind of other I want to say musical genres. They're all musical, but like more technical genres,
right.
so to speak.
You started playing drums though when you were like a little kid.
When I was 3, I was a baby.
A good time to get it. I mean,
Yeah, I was beating on all the stuff. And
Yeah.
But yeah, like then I think being I have a love-hate relationship sometimes with how church made me feel, but there's a lot of love because I learned so much from that experience, and I learned, though it was also tightly like connected to music, though it was also music. I've always felt like I've been able to feel the music more so than the religion.
Yeah.
And so it, for me, it was just like the music. I was there for the music.
Yeah.
Like since a kid, like I didn't really want to go except for the music.
Okay.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
And that was what, like, that was, I had more of a relationship to that than to like the other program matter. It was like,
Right.
I was just like, well, I want to do this and feel this. I hope they play this song because it makes me feel this way. Or
Oh, nice.
even if I wasn't playing, I loved the way it sounds. And now that I'm older and I have experience around that, I know what it was that was moving me. And yeah, a lot of it was atmosphere, and a lot of it was just my connection to like tones and like the way those feel.
So you felt that pretty early, like that was around you, mom
Yeah.
saying. You have siblings?
I do. I have a younger brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your age difference there?
He's we're 2 years and 2 weeks apart.
2 years and 2 weeks. Okay. Yeah.
Love him though.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. So, and were you playing for the church?
Mm-hmm.
At what age did you start playing for the church?
That I was 5, honestly. I was
Okay.
5, and there were some older kids. You know how that goes. We got pushed off, but it was like, hold it down as long as you could when you got the moment. And so, yeah, when I was 5 years old, I started doing that. And as I started getting older and better, I mean, because that's the other thing about church music, though. It is competitive.
How did you deal with that when you were 5 years old?
So I remember not being able to play very well, and my cousin that I was talking about earlier, Gerard, he was like, man, for some reason, man, I had terrible coordination. So it's very different now than then. But I remember I couldn't play hi-hat at the same time.
Sure.
And I could only do one or the other. And like I remember one day he made me do it. He was just like, do it. He's like yelling at me. He was playing the organ, I think. And I did it. And I was like, oh. And then after that, it clicked.
Yeah.
And it was just like, that was it. And so
How did he force you?
he just really yelled at me. And I was a very sensitive child.
So he's like 25.
He's
You're
probably,
like 5.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And so he's just like pushing. And like,
authoritarian kind of coming in. And you're impressionable.
Yeah.
You're like, you love him. He's showing you all about the, Toto and everything else.
Yeah,
And you're
right.
like, all right, I'll do it.
Sure.
And then you clicked.
Then it clicked.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, it was funny because that is one of my earliest childhood memories, one of them, but I do remember that specific moment though, because I just couldn't get it, and I got picked on about it a little bit, I think, by some of the other drummers, but
That you couldn't get the hi-hat.
I couldn't do it at the same time. And so, but yeah, that moment that it clicked, it was like my brain was like, oh,
It's like a puzzle, right?
it is. It's like, whoa.
My daughter, she's 7 right now, and that's her kid,
Oh,
right?
nice.
And so she's just now laying down like a legit beat, but on the ride,
Oh,
it's crossing over for her. It's kind of hard. Like as soon as she does that, she kind of loses it. But it's right there.
It's close.
Maybe
yeah.
I just need to get an organ in here and start yelling at her.
It will work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gotta fit your style too,
Yeah.
So, but they're loving it.
That's good.
You play gospel drums until like from 5 until
mid-20s.
Okay.
And I was still doing a church thing. It was just the style was very different.
Okay.
But I played church until probably 27, 8, 9, somewhere there.
So a long
Yeah,
time.
for a minute. Yeah.
So in gospel music, like, when you see, who's it, like Eric Moore and these kinds of people,
Oh,
like,
yeah, gospel chops.
Oh my
for
gosh.
sure.
Dude. I mean, the precision,
Yeah,
and the
man.
power,
Yeah, it's
and
crazy.
the feel all
Yes.
together. Like, I think
Yeah.
you start to see, like, it's like, it's almost like militant, right?
It
like
is.
just like
That is
how
so true.
they just must woodshed stuff and just like get it right.
Yes, a lot of shedding.
Yeah.
Like just shedding. I've been to so many sheds, and like just they would go. This is crazy. We ideally link up around like they always start at night, of course, but be like 7, 8 at night. And sometimes I would shed people to like 3 or 4 in the morning.
At church.
At a church.
Wow.
Just going ham. Just going ham. I'd bring like, I had a pretty nice kit after high school, and then
What was it?
It was a Pacific PDP by DW. I love those, man. Great drums. I missed that kit though. That was one of the best kits I ever had. Honestly, yeah.
Was it so? Like when I think about like drummers like Eric Moore and stuff like that, you think about like tons of gear.
Yeah.
Was it
cymbals,
like that for you?
Cymbals.
Yeah.
I had a reasonable amount. I didn't have a ton of money. There's some guys that had some real cool stuff all the time. Like
yeah,
I
did
could
you
think,
have?
yeah.
Was there like a church kit though that y'all would play?
Oh yeah, church kits are infamous for being trash,
Right.
especially the churches that I was growing up in. Like there were a couple churches that had some really good drums. I remember my church drums weren't great at all, but we made them sound good.
Yeah.
But yeah, think about like those dudes though. Even some of the old gospel chop videos. It really was, at least for what I remember, is like about the cymbals. Like
Yeah.
you gotta have an array of cymbals.
Yep. A lot of accents.
A lot of accents. all the high end tones. But yeah, like I had a pretty decent cymbal collection at one point for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I'm like, I should maybe own a few more. So I really like that ride. I'm like, oh, that's dope. I maybe should add that one on.
It's got a pretty wide range.
That thing is nice.
That's
I haven't wanted to buy cymbals in forever.
The minor monophonic.
Yeah. Definitely gonna keep my eye out for one of those. But yeah, growing up it was definitely it was traditionally 5 pieces. There were some places that would have like an extra floor tom. I remember going to a couple of churches like that. But for the most part, that was like all I knew was 3 times snare.
Yeah.
And the cymbals is in as many places as you can fit a cymbal. If you have it, use it.
So, but now, what do you play?
Now I play like, actually, what I play when somebody calls me now is a kick and a floor and have a crash and a ride.
Yeah, and a snare.
In my hats. Yeah,
Right.
kick floor. Yeah, kick snare floor.
And it's like I've seen you play a few times now, and it's like I'm always blown away just at the range that you get from what you got.
I went through this phase where I kind of had to, because I was on tour and we were doing a lot of festival circuits, and a lot of those times you got to use what's there for the sake of time, or like sharing shows with people, like opening. The drummer kind of gets the short end of that stick generally, and so it's.
How do you mean? Just because you got to play on.
You got to play on somebody, and people, like a lot of people, just like, it's a drum set, and I want to just hit them in the face. I'm gonna be honest, that's how it makes me feel.
Right.
Because I would be like, well, why don't I go get you a guitar off of the wall somewhere, and I'm just put in your hand, and I want you to solo exactly like you solo your entire career.
And
don't fuck up. So.
No, you're fine. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
And this is how drummers are different.
Yeah.
I
think so,
ways,
for
right?
sure. Because maybe somebody could rip that guitar apart because the notes are the notes. But the notes are the notes with the drums, but where you have to go for that note varies. Right. And the way it sounds when you hit it varies. And that affects everything.
Every angle.
Every angle
changes it.
Every angle
stick you use
changes the pitch. Of the stick. Changes the pitch.
That's made out of.
Changes the pitch.
And because like you play the drums, and the drums like they talk back, right?
They talk back.
And so, and they're gonna rebound or do whatever, suck up your sound or whatever.
Yeah.
If you're not in your usual comfort zone.
It's so true. And hitting a cymbal that doesn't sound like the cymbal that you want to be hitting can just shatter my world. It has. I've been on plenty of stages where I've gotten way better at blocking that part of things out. It's really hard because if you're playing, I take tone very seriously. And if I'm working with someone, chances are they're working with me because of my tone. And my tone, like in certain settings, I remember actually we did this spot. I forget what it was for, but it was in a big auditorium. And the band I was touring with at the time, they had some stuff there, and I think some things I couldn't use in mine, but I remember the cymbals were the worst part of that because they were so shrill that it was just like they were cutting way too much, and it was like I was trying to hit them certain kinds of ways because that makes a difference, but it wasn't. And it felt to me like we were all disjointed because our tone was so way far off. And it's like, man. And even I feel like we had a conversation about it. They were like, great, but man, that kid sounded terrible. And it's like, yeah. Sometimes, so I got into the habit actually to where I kind of stopped taking no for an answer, and I would just be like, figure it out. I gotta have my kit.
Tell me more. Okay.
Like I would show up, and it'd be like, oh, okay, we can't share a kit, or I have to share. I was like, no. Then I'm gonna set up very compact, and this is when I just started learning how to play with less. So it was, it was a little bit less of a blow. I'm like, I'll play it like this, but I'm gonna play it like this.
Okay.
And so I kind of demanded that for a little while, and it worked, and everybody was all right.
Okay.
At the end of it.
So staying true to your tone,
Mm-hmm.
and like how it was, like how you were feeling from it, like within, like, because so many times, right, the drummer feels like a hired gun.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because like one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is like this idea that the drummer is like has the best seat in the house, right? Like you're supporting this music.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, like you're supporting, but you're a part of it.
Right.
You're not just supporting it, but like that's how so many people think about it, right?
That's why I quit.
Yeah.
That was exactly why I quit. It was for that reason right there. I was everybody's support system, and I felt like I had none of my own at a really important time. And so,
where do you find it?
Internally, inside. Now I understand that situation happened for a reason, to push me to this place of where I had to depend on myself in different ways. I've always depended on myself, but this time it was from a much more like very important in the way of just like what I actually wanted to be doing, which is what I've recently figured out. Producing and singing is like, I love that, and I want to implement drums into that my way. But I didn't know what that felt like. I didn't know what it was like to be an artist on my own, because I've been supporting so many other artists, and these things I was feeling were so new, and I was confused, and all it really did was just, it pushed me. It was really good. I'm happy that I had those conflicts that made me feel so unsupported that I didn't want to support anybody else until I could figure out how to support myself. And so that's what happened. That's what the hiatus was about. It was really about me figuring out how to support myself artistically. And that is important to me, and the respect around that is important to me. And sometimes I'm like, I feel bad about that, because it feels a little ego-y sometimes. And I'm like, well, but
wait, which part feels
like the respect part, because that was kind of what led to a lot of that conversation with that band, and it made me feel disrespected. And as a musician who works hard and is extremely talented, because you don't want anyone else to play these drums except for me, which says to me that I am dope. And so I just got sick of people calling me because they needed that from me. So I took it away from everybody. That was what that was.
And that was like just before pandemic.
That was just before pandemic.
And so but this was sounds like a touring outfit kind of.
Yeah, we were doing, at this point, not touring too crazy, but writing a lot.
It sounds like you've been a lot of places, right?
Yeah.
So Greenville.
Yeah, I lived in Greenville. Then I went to school in New York. I went to college in South Carolina first.
You went
to Clemson.
Right?
Yeah, I went to Clemson, and then I worked around, got heavily into music, and then decided I wanted to go to music school.
Okay, so you were still gigging at Clemson.
No, I had moved back more Greenville, but I still had, from being in Clemson so much and playing, I had a church gig there, and met so many people in that area, and they had kind of become a community down there for me. Because I didn't know anybody when I went to college. I didn't know anyone. So I found my people in that music gospel music scene.
Right.
And so when I moved back to Greenville, I was still spending a lot of time there when I left Clemson. So I was kind of gigging mostly in that area doing church stuff. And then I found the gig circuit in Greenville, and that was crazy.
What does that look like?
At that point, it was so alien to me. I didn't know, because, growing up so religiously, I'm like, man, what? I remember a good friend of mine called me one night. I had a date with this girl that I really liked, and I was like, finally I had the courage to ask her out, and then I got a call from this girl's like my sister, and she's like, I need you. And I happened to have my drums, and she told me what was going on, and I guess the drummer had gotten wasted, and it was up on this platform that was like above a very, very far drop. So they were like, he can't go up there.
Okay, so yeah, this is another thing when we think about a drummer's mindset, too, right? Like, because like substance abuse is not a joke. And
it is.
I mean,
not.
In music in general, but for drummers, right?
Oh yeah.
What do you think that's about?
Oh man,
where do you think it comes from?
That's a good question. The answer would probably differ. I know for myself, man, yeah, I definitely played hard. And so, yeah, at some point, I remember catching a cramp because I haven't drank enough water, and just like, how am I, and way too drunk, honestly. And yeah, figuring out all the, feelings around that. That's a good place. A good question. Because I'm thinking about, one part is like, oh yeah, you guys get a tab. Musicians, generally speaking, will take advantage of that tab.
Right.
And where I was playing at that time in Greenville, I had made a lot of friends with the bartenders, because why not? And they were generally pretty cool people. That was playing that first gig for it's my friend Tamika, and that was my very first gig with them, and like you said, it like the guy, I think he actually showed up drunk. They hadn't even started playing, so he had some deeper rooted issues. But I do think about that sometimes, because I definitely play shows, and I was pretty cliche drummer there for a hot minute.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like from my perspective, sometimes it seems like drumming is like one of those things. Like, you're constantly listening, right? Constantly, you're listening to everybody.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And everyone has to listen to you.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're trying to you're like a shepherd, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
For sure.
It's got to be
when
like,
you say that,
it's a lot of
thinking.
It's a lot of thinking. It's a lot of energy.
And I think about, a lot of times as human beings, man, as complex as we are in our brains and how they work. And I'm thinking about, like, as I'm playing, all of the things that I'm aware of, like what my senses are doing. Now, there was a time I went where I played with a hat on, so that it was like a curtain. So it kind of visually stunted me, which took away that form of seeing things. So that freed up some CPU. And then it's like, then I'm using more of my ears. I'm not talking. I do like hum a little to myself sometimes when I play. I figured out. But I'll think about when I sat down and back in that time when I was gigging really heavy in the bars, all the bars. And like being a little nervous, and like I was a little, I was full of myself a little bit. I'll be honest. I was the best person probably doing it. Not the best, but one of the best. Like, kind of killing it. Had a lot of people calling and stuff. And so then, but I would get nervous a lot before some of those gigs for a while. And it, like, one drink would kind of calm it. And then it's like I could focus in on my ears a little better.
What were you
it's
nervous about? Like
the first word that came to my mind was failure. And in a sense, like a form of failure, like messing up. To me, I've always wanted to be flawless, That's not really the case now, but at that time, I was like, I'm gonna mess up, and then I would.
So it was
mess
like
up.
for everything that's music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like so, hitting the right note at the right
Yeah.
time, the right tone.
Yeah, and that probably comes from that whole competitive church situation. Like, just don't. I've literally had some nightmare child moments in like church music, and I've been like booed off the drums before. That was crazy.
Oh wow! How
But
old were you?
I was pretty young. I was like maybe like 7 or 8,
Oh wow!
or like 9, maybe somewhere around in there.
Yeah, that's like significant.
Pretty intense.
Experience.
Yeah, my feelings were so hurt. You know, in retrospect, yeah, it doesn't matter. But it. Fast forward to that moment where I'm like, I don't want to mess up, because to me, it's like I got to be the best. I have to be the best.
And so you like, okay, so you got booed off the stage at a young age, but you came back.
I definitely did. Yeah, I kind of felt like that situation. I was always the underdog for various reasons, but you know, church stuff, politicky stuff. But it was like whatever. It taught me tenacity though, and that was something that you know, it's good for me until it's not. Sometimes I'm like being tenacious when it's very unreasonable to be, and so I have to check. I'm very competitive in things, and like I want to be at the best that I can be at every single thing that I do, which is ridiculous. I understand that that's not the case, but drumming for me, that was like all I knew, and I was good at it. I've been doing it since I was a baby, and so I'd be like, I have to maintain my perfection around this. Okay. So I'm gonna drink this first beer, and that's gonna help, and then it's gonna do so good that I'm gonna drink another one.
Yeah.
And then it's just light speed from that point.
Yeah.
And then and then now I'm wasted.
Right. Yeah.
But for me, it felt like, well, I have this thing that's dulling some other things, so where I can focus really, like let this really crazy information process that needs to process, and I'm gonna do it better, because not only am I hearing everything, but now I'm feeling everything a little differently, and like my bravery has gone up, so I'm going for things I probably wouldn't necessarily go for, which gigging that hard, that as often as I was, with the caliber of musician that I ended up playing with a lot, because I ended up playing with some killing guys, like some crazy dope players, and it like just upped my like desire to be even better, which is kind of like that time in my life was so intense.
And like, how old are you at this point?
I'm between 21 and 24.
So this is after Clemson?
This is after, yeah.
Before New York.
So there was like, I was in Greenville, then New York, then back to Greenville.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. So New York was kind of in the middle. I was there for about a year, maybe, I think.
But you were in New York after Clemson?
After Clemson, okay. Yeah. Gotcha. And so, yeah, actually this was pre-New York. I'm sorry. It was a little pre-New York, yeah, because I was older than most of those kids when I went to New York. I was like 25.
Okay.
And so
non-traditional student.
Yep. Non-traditional, yep. And so this time I was 21 to 24, and just like going like, yeah, it was a lot of playing for a lot of different genres and a lot of different styles. Just like I could do it all. That was the one advantage that I had, is that I could do, because my taste in music was still pretty like, not as much as, it wasn't as wide as it is now, but it was definitely quite wide at that point. I was dipping in a lot of rock, and like I think Fall Out Boy was really popping, so I was listening to a lot of that. Jaze had did a Linkin Park thing, and I was listening to that stuff. The Roots was crazy because it led me to Questlove, and he's talking about everything, so that had me listening to little spurts of different things. And I think but mainly I was so enamored with rock music because I hated it so much when I was in high school. Uh-huh. I hated it. I never listened to it. That I like forget how I stumbled upon it. Was it The Fray? Somebody. But I remember like some of these little songs and like my connection to tone is what kind of pulled me into it. And then I was like, oh, I like that melody. That's cool. And then, of course, for me, it was always about the drums. Foo Fighters was another one, man. I really fell into the Foo Fighters pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And
like hitting hard.
Yeah. And Taylor Hawkins, rest in power, that guy.
Yeah.
And like, and Ronnie Vannucci from the Killers. That's right, because I went through this thing where I sold all my cymbals, and his tone was one of the tones that I was really honing in on, like heavy, because I loved the way his cymbals sounded.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was like finding all these new genres of music, and I wasn't afraid to play it. I was like, if they are good musicians, I'll play with them. It could be bluegrass. I don't care. If they are dope.
There's like a specific rhythm to bluegrass. It's pretty incredible.
It is.
You
yeah.
know? Like, and a lot of times, like, they're tight.
Mm-hmm. It's so I've played with some guys in town, some good friends of mine. It's like Newgrass, Red Clay Revival, but I've played with them quite a bit. And yeah, they're super dope. And Brushfire Stained Grass, those dudes are really dope too. Okay. Very Newgrassy, but it's like there was some stuff in church that we did that sounded just like that. Yeah. It was like, I knew, and that's what it felt like. I was like, oh, this feels like a slightly slower version of shout music.
Playing different styles, being able to play anything was important.
Yes. I want to be able, if anybody called me, and it happened, like I got calls and have gotten to go to some amazing places because of what I've been able to play.
How does your Newgrass drumming affect your soul pop music? Or any, like, not specifically that, but just like, how do these other styles kind of affect the way I think about it?
Yeah. It's interesting because when I'm writing for myself, the inspiration comes from like a few different places, and I don't know where it'll show up. Sometimes it's in the form of a drum beat, and like, but I thought that would be how I would primarily find, but I've really just kind of like all of these different influences. I'm not sure what I'm going to be listening to whenever the day comes, and I love every kind of music, and I'm generally hunting for new stuff. I have some stuff that I really love, and so I'll sit, and sometimes I'm mostly inspired from other music is honestly what happens. I'll be hearing something or singing along to something, and I'll like maybe sing along to it, and then I'll have a melody that's kind of based around what they were doing, but it's all its own thing. And so then next thing I know, I've written a whole song around that thing that inspired me from that. So it's strange because I've recently started really trying to hone in on keeping things I don't want to put myself in a box, and I don't feel like I am, but my intention is a little bit different. So before, when I was first releasing all my solo stuff, that was like a year or so ago, I think. Yeah, so a year and some change. It was just kind of pouring out of me. There were songs I had already started during COVID, during that whole process. And a lot of that stuff was just, it was very much far away from the drums because I didn't want to look at them. So the way I was making music was very different. And I love that process and those songs.
I'm hearing like reinvention over and over for you.
That's kind of true.
It's like on a cycle. And it sounds like it hits you at these times.
It's funny you say that. Some I've had some people say that to me before.
Yeah.
And it's like, I feel like it's always after me being extremely dramatic. And at least that's how I'll read it. I'm like, oh, that was a lot. And this one's like, oh man, it feels like you reinvented yourself. I was like, I guess it feels like that, like constantly rebirthing in some form.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of I think that's pretty incredible, right? Like, what else is there? Like, if you're not changing, you're not growing.
Yeah.
And it's never comfortable.
It is not ever comfortable. That's been it's been great because it has this reinvention. Now I feel music very differently, and I'm actually listening to it. That's the thing I noticed the most. I'll pull some stuff up from like way back. I actually rediscovered the Blueprint. I was like, man, I haven't listened to the Blueprint in a hot minute. Like, I'm gonna play this back, and now my producer brain is listening to it because I'm so heavy in that right now, and the songwriting, and like just in a different kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And I just that was one of the albums that I played to all the time, practiced to so much, and like hearing it actually without me playing the drums, but hearing the drums and like how they sound and like the choices and like how everything is together, like, and the art around all of that is it's just interesting to me now because it when I'm writing the music, like you said, all those different genres are constantly playing in my head, and I'm drawing all the inspiration from. So yeah, listening to that made me want to be a little more lyrical, like, and like, I don't know, approach my lyrics in a different way. So I've been exploring some of that.
Has there been a point in time when you were just not inspired?
Yeah. That has happened. I think I'm feeling that more these days than I ever have before, because when I'm drumming and like taking part in other people's music, my inspiration was a little different. And maybe there was a time when I was performing percussively that I can honestly say I've sat on the drums and just been like, I'm not feeling it. I'm not inspired to like put my best foot forward, even though that kind of negates what I said earlier. But there have definitely been moments where I've like lulled and been like, I'm gonna meet the standard, and that's what you get today.
And that's where you're at.
But that's where I'm at.
And so that's interesting. Like, just what I'm getting from you so far in this story is like the standards are high.
They are.
And they've been high since you were probably 3 years old.
Yeah. So yeah.
And so you're like, you just get the standard, and this is like, this is part of the reason like you get the calls.
This is a problem, right? Exactly.
You can't
I'm like sorry for my poor performance, and everybody's like, that was amazing, and I'm like, but it wasn't though. Not by my standards. That was bad business. But
what's it like for you when someone compliments you?
Sometimes I was raised to be very humble, so a lot of times it's very problematic. I don't want to take compliments. Now it's a little, I'm like, all right, sure, thank you. Like, that was your experience, and I don't want to discount your experience that you had. That might have been a terrible show for me, but for whatever reason, your experience, that was amazing. So I'm just gonna say thanks. I'm glad you enjoyed that trash.
Then you judge that person.
No,
you're like, no, I don't like you because you have bad taste.
Your taste. No.
I'm just kidding. The first time I remember, I went to go see Fishbone play.
Ooh.
And this was like, I'd seen them a couple of times, but this was in a small venue out in Wyoming, right?
Oh, wow, cool.
And I got a chance to like sit there with Angelo Moore at the bar, and we were just chatting. I was like, Angelo, where'd you get your theremin?
Oh.
He's like, there's this small town called Asheville.
Oh.
I was like, I know Asheville. He's like, I got it from the Moog store, I'm like, that's cool. So like, we talked about band leaders earlier, right? Like Fishbone is, I mean, one of my favorites still.
That's what's up.
I think they're still touring. Or I know they are. But anyway, we were chatting, having a nice conversation. It's like real light, but like just real stuff like you would talk to anybody. And I was like, Angelo, I just want to let you know, like, you're you and your band are like one of the biggest influences on me and how I play. And he's like, I don't want to hear it. And he was like, just stop.
Yeah,
and he like walked away, and I was like, what just happened? And so it's like, I guess like he was looking like when you do it all the time. The story I made up on his behalf, if I may, is like he probably gets that a lot, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And I think it's probably hard, like if you're touring, because they toured hard for a long time, and gigged hard for a long time, and if you like, you're just looking for that like normal kind of interaction, like a real connection, and not this fandom. Then it's just like, ouch. Do you remember the first question I asked you when I met you?
Oh,
I was
man.
like, I said, can I give you a compliment?
Oh, you
Are
did
you
say
okay with
that. I
compliment?
was like, okay, sure, I'm gonna take it.
And I know that's always like a loaded question, you know, because like, what are
Yeah.
you supposed to say? No, I'm actually not good with compliments.
I am
You
currently not taking those. Thanks.
I'll take a drink, maybe.
But a drink, I will. That's funny. It's funny you say that. I remember meeting Dave Grohl.
Oh yeah,
And
where was that?
that was here in Asheville. Actually, they did Christmas Jam.
Right.
And he did that.
Just recently, a couple
Yeah, it
years ago.
wasn't too long ago. And I had did the jam by day with some friends, and I had been thinking I knew he was
With
going to
who?
be in town. I played with who did I play with? I think it was with the Digs. It was like we played and it killed it. It was a great show, and I knew Dave Grohl was going to be in town, and I was like, I'm cashing in all my manifestation points right now. But I would really love to meet Dave Grohl, and I was like, and I really want it to be not no backstage shit. I don't want that. It would be cool if it's something that's memorable to some degree. So I finished the jam by day. I walk out and I was hanging out with a homie and we were talking. He's like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure that was Dave Grohl," and I was like, "Be right back." So I caught up to him. It had just started snowing. I'll never forget. It was like really cool day. He was crossing over and I like ran up to him without causing any kind of scene. That was like so specific. I was like, I'm gonna try to approach this as normal and regular as possible because I really don't want him to be like, I gotta get out of here. So I caught up to him and we were pacing up and he kind of like looked and I like looked at him and I was like, hey, how's it going? And he's like, hey. I was like, I know who you are and I just wanted to say real quick, huge inspiration, and I just want to say hey. And he's like, oh, that's cool, man. No, yeah, thanks. And so he's like, I was like, yeah. So for me, I was like, okay. And then he says, do you happen to know which way Thomas Wolfe is? And so he's like, it's this way, right? And I was like, actually, it is not. And it wasn't. I was like, but I'm headed that way. I can just walk. I was like, it's not really far, and I can just walk with you if that's cool. He's like, oh, totally. So we just started walking, and we started talking, and we just started talking a little bit. These people stopped us for a picture. It was cool. I just kind of hung. I think I took the picture, or somebody did it, but hung back. And then we walked on, and we just chatted, and it was very pleasant. And then I was like, all right, this is it right here. And he's like, oh, cool. So he gave me some tickets and a couple backstage passes.
Oh, wow.
And like he was like, man, what was your name? And and it was super dope because we had a cool conversation about a few different things. Like it's like 15, 20 minutes.
Nice.
So I was like, if I ever meet him again, I bet he'll remember that. That snowy afternoon in Asheville.
You can meet your heroes.
You can, man. You can, and have an impact.
Yeah.
It might be. You might think it's small, but you never know how that might have affected the rest of that day.
Right. I mean, that is memorable. Yeah. It's like a walk through town.
Yeah.
Pretty much all of downtown.
Yeah, for sure. So I ran back and everybody was like, where have you been? I was like, just walking and talking with Dave Grohl. They're like, what? I was like, yeah, man. So yeah, that was I really picked up when you like the compliment. I was like, I really so much because I know how that feels for me. I was like, the last thing he wants to do, I'm sure, is walk and talk about how amazing he is. And so I took a gamble on not doing that. And just like you said, like touring that heavy and having done it, some of that genuine connection does get a little lost. I'm sure on his like caliber, his level of where his career is, especially, people maybe just want something or like I didn't take a picture of that moment because I felt like that would ruin it.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see that.
So I met a lot of people and I'm just like, I don't need a picture for this moment. There are some in other moments, but most of them I'm way more interested in like just like this right here. And if a photo comes out of it, dope, but if not, that's cool too.
Right.
Yeah, it
always does seem to be like the peak of where that conversation is going to go.
Yeah.
Can I get a picture?
And that's it. That's good. That's going to be it. That's it. You're right. It is.
There's something about that, like when you were talking about that story and just the compliments and things like that. There's just thinking about art in general, right?
Yeah.
And like how so many times like you hear about artists like putting something out there, whether it's like say it's like a painting, right?
Yeah.
Or it's poetry,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and people want to dissect it,
Yeah.
you know, and they like read so much into it.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you or you hear about, you know, other artists kind of like taking on this perspective of like, you know, they, a fan might say something to them about what their art meant to them, like or like what they read into it.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, I didn't. That's not what I was thinking about when I wrote it."
True.
It's like, but it's maybe it's not for you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's this concept of like you're just you're tuned in somehow to like whatever the art ether, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it, like you're a conduit for it, you
Right.
know. And so like you put something out, and it means something to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
means more to them than it does to you, maybe in
Yeah.
that moment. Like that's kind of a beautiful thing.
It really, you know, I always remember the first person I heard say this. I used to go to these poetry slams, and they'd be like, "I'm an artist, and I'm sensitive about my shit." And I'm like, they would always say it in like a kind of funny way, but it was like what they were saying. They were encouraging people to like, don't laugh, don't taunt, don't whatever, because I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. So it was like allow the artist the platform, and however you receive it to yourself.
Right.
So what I learned from those moments, which I've had to kind of relearn with putting music out, is trying not to like the songs are going to mean what they mean to me, and maybe that'll translate, and maybe it won't, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And like, because if I feel that is a beautiful piece of music, then it is then. And so I just have to like, there might be, of course, things I might not like about it, whatever, but someone else's interpretation of that might be that it is like amazing in a different kind of way. Or they might hear the lyric in a way that you didn't mean it, but it could work. And it's like, oh, that's dope. That's a cool perspective.
Right.
And so like hearing it that way, but it is, that's kind of how I feel about it. And I maybe didn't always, because I always had this deep desire to be understood, or I used to really badly. And now I just try to be very intentional and specific with what I say, so that hopefully it'll carry the weight it's supposed to carry. And I kind of take that to like my writing and putting art out. So I hope that, but also I'm very open to the way people might perceive the music as well.
Yeah.
Because our brains are interesting. Crazy.
Yeah, for sure. It's like it is kind of amazing, like how your brains work, and you know how our brains work, and you know, kind of how it all like how it comes out in the instrument or any other piece of art, you know, and like that feedback that we get from people,
right?
You know, so much is what we want. We want to know that like what we're putting out there is like what we intend.
Yeah, and
sometimes people like get something different out of it.
Yeah,
and it's still meaningful to them, but I don't know. There's something there.
I think that intention, that putting art out with intention, is really great. And I think once you're gonna hand it to people and you have that intention with it, I think that intention has to be twofold, and understand that this may be perceived differently, but this is you could give somebody a gift and think it's the best gift in the world, and then you open that gift and hate it. And you may have known that person your whole life. But that is a possibility. Chances are that's not what's going to happen, but it is a possibility.
I don't know. Like, what are you feeling like as far as the art and all that? Like, I know that sometimes, like you said, like, maybe not as motivated or inspired right now.
Yeah.
But you're still producing.
Yeah. Inspiration has been a little bit of a wave lately. And so currently I'm just really one thing at a time. I'm working on some new music. I have been playing drums a bit more consistently. The Monday nights have been really dope. And
That's Monday nights with rum
Yeah,
or caramia.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. No
Oops.
sweat. No,
Y'all are
you had
so
all the
good.
components. Thanks. Yeah,
I
my
mean,
boy
just
Daniel.
yeah, such a good feel. That whole
Yeah,
like tonally. What do you think?
I actually had to think about doing that for a minute, and I decided to do it because they all are really great musicians. Like, and my always with this is like, who's playing bass? And then they were like, Daniel Iannucci. I was like, okay,
So
dope.
good.
Because I love his approach and his tone, and I've always admired Kara Mia's songwriting and Rom's as well,
Hmm.
and just the tonal
Yeah.
things, especially because that I knew that they were gonna also have me singing my own original stuff as well,
Yeah.
and we kind of
Good stuff.
collectively. Oh,
Loved
thank
it,
you.
man. You're one of those
Appreciate
folks
it.
that'll sing and play at the same time. That's
Oh
a whole
man.
other conversation, I think, from
Oh
my perspective.
man,
And we
devil's
should.
dive into that. I absolutely hate it.
Do you?
I don't want to do it. I do not want to present my music that way.
Okay.
However, it has been an incredible exercise for me in being a new singer because I am very new at this.
You're
I've sang
new.
my whole life, but
Okay.
not sang for real.
Okay.
Not like for people and for myself, and like recording and all that stuff. No, never done
We're talking about. I mean, yeah,
it.
that's a mastery. Like if you've got the muscle memory for all the tones you want to get out of your drums.
Oh man,
Just with the sticks, and then you're also like
yeah. Oh
going to the
man.
high end of like
It's-
the melody and singing at the same time. Like it's remarkable.
It's been I have enjoyed that show way more than I thought that I would, and one part because everybody picks and plays good music, they writes good music. So to me, I feel like that's great. But for like you said, the tone of that room first is like my favorite in the world. It's
Is
one
it?
of my favorite rooms that I get to play, and it's so unassuming and small, but it has all the right components for just a really great sounding room, and for especially for like how I like to play and hear things, and all of those guys are
That's
just
that
so
five
dope.
walnut.
Five Walnut, yeah, Five Walnut Wine Bar, and it's just like I feel like I'm in. I love New York. I have family from New York. I spent so much time there as a kid, and living there is great. I try to visit as often as I can, and Five Walnut feels like I'm in like some little cool little wine bar in Brooklyn somewhere. Like
It's a good room.
vibing.
It's a good crowd
It's a
too.
good crowd, yeah, for
They're all
sure.
like listening.
Yeah,
You know.
such a good room, and yeah. So I'm doing that, and like the all of our tones coming together really well, and it's been such a great exercise and like inspiring. It has inspired me to like go home. I'm working on like I've been really trying to lean into producing and doing that with and for other people, and that show has really opened up that moment for me, and like really getting to work with Karamia on some things, and kind of inviting other people into my stuff is it's been great. It's kind of it has been necessary, even though like that wasn't something I really wanted to do because of its impact on me mentally so much, drumming, that coming back to it this way it's been new and different, and like the drumming part is so familiar, and it took a minute. It's riding a bike for sure. And so, like, once all the rust is kind of like falling off, I feel like I don't have to think again. Because at first I was like having to think through some stuff
Sure.
for not having to play so long. But now it's like everything is where I expect it to be. It sounds like I want. And now I'm getting the chance to like put that on autopilot in a way while still being conscious of it. And then think about my voice and how. And fortunately, I've had fairly good posture as a drummer for a while. But it's so important, and like learning how to like work that muscle and use it and listen while doing it's been a very interesting thing.
The shepherd collecting it all, like hunting for that rhythm, and like
man.
finding that tone and
Yeah,
the notes and the melody.
yeah, it has
That's
been
a lot.
Yeah,
The CEO.
it feels like it. I'm like, man, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
but I really enjoy it. It's, you know, I love learning, and I'm learning a lot. I'm working on some things with a good close friend of mine. We're it's very early. Nothing's in stone. We're still trying to figure out some things with this. Ideally speaking, it'll be a label, a record label,
Oh,
in a
okay.
sense. And so a lot of my production and a lot of my songwriting, a lot of this skill building is a lot primarily for myself, and then very much for like this business venture that I've always known I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's for like a while. I love talented musicians, specifically great, like, and I feel like I have a good ear for it for the most part, and at least picking it out and hearing it, and me and my good close friend Ted work really well together, producing and writing, and like, yeah, I've learned a lot from him, and he's like been a catalyst for me learning a lot of other things in different places. It's been really dope. And so that's kind of where my headspace is around growing that, and that's a slow burn for right now, like, but it is burning. We like some things are being put in motion, and so I think that's gonna be exciting, and like recording and working with different artists, but being very involved in the production side of things,
Mm-hmm.
to just like really more of like guides in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's important, especially in the recording situation. As artists, we can get lost in the sauce,
Yeah.
and having really good guardrails is nice.
Those boundaries.
And especially in a recording situation, and like knowing what's gonna work and what's not gonna work, and like the most like in collaborative way possible. And I think that's how we've kind of been wanting to approach the record making process, and the production side of things as well, you know.
Cool.
So yeah, that's like kind of where my head has been at pretty heavily, and a lot of that is grounded in my music right now, and like kind of figuring out the ways I want to say things, and like methods and all this stuff, so that it kind of just being in that position, then it'll help me be more beneficial as the producer.
Okay.
So
That's
that's
awesome.
where I'm at.
Yeah, you're like the story that I'm hearing is kind of an incredible like way to accept all your experiences and like channel
Mm.
them into something that's
Mm.
like integrative,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like keeping that integrity, like doing all the things that you enjoy and what you
Mm.
and leaving out the things you don't, and like providing this like
Yeah.
these guardrails, and
Yeah.
if
For
the
sure.
setting's right, this is what we're gonna do. Like
Yeah.
you have an aesthetic
Yeah.
that's clear,
Yeah.
and a style.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
cool.
think it comes
Thanks for
through.
saying
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I think anyone who's seen you play, even if it's maybe not your favorite thing to do right now, like it comes
that.
through. Like that, your placement, the range, the tone. Yeah, it's always a joy to see and
I
listen
appreciate
to.
that.
Whether or not you're ready for that compliment, it's not for me to say.
I'm
But
gonna that means a ton.
yeah,
Like for real. Like it feels validating, and not that it's necessary, but it's nice, and I
right.
appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
do.
sounds like you've got like a pretty good sense of yourself and like what you need. You don't
Yeah,
always need it from the outside.
yeah, but
Feedback's
it's so
good,
nice. But feedback is really, I've yeah, I've been learning a lot about feedback lately, and feedback is great, and also, I appreciate, some people don't always tell you, so I appreciate that you said it. Is Yeah, sometimes it's hard to take a compliment, but it's I it is necessary sometimes, and in some moments it'll come in a time where I'm like, I actually needed to hear
yeah.
that.
Well, you get down. You're detail oriented, right?
Mhm.
Like you
Mhm.
get down into the nitty gritty. Like
Yeah.
maybe like you want it to be just this way. You know what's in your head, and you want to get it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that you're constantly on that hunt, right? So
Yeah.
like when you come up, you're like,
Yeah.
what? This good? I'm not done yet. Just
Yeah.
just wait, right?
Yeah. That I've definitely felt that.
Kevin Parker said something. I just saw an interview with him.
Uh-huh.
Tame Impala,
Oh yeah.
and he said something about like he was spending forever on this one. He's a drummer first, right? So he was spending so much time on this snare sound that he wanted for one of his tracks, and like just pouring over it. He finally released it, but he was like never still like he's just not quite there with it.
Yeah.
And then one day he was like walking down the street, and he heard this sound that he was looking for this whole time. And he comes up closer and closer to this club, and it's his song and that snare drum sound.
That's
He
crazy.
got like because he's like so detail oriented and exactly what he wants. That sometimes if we don't take a step back and look, like
I already had it.
it's hard. Yeah, I found something.
Yeah.
It's
that is a crazy story because I feel like I've experienced that, and then just like I've definitely, as a producer lately, I've done that. I've had a day where I was like, that is not the bass tone. That's not the one. That's not the one. It's not. And then I'm like, go and be like, one of my old tracks. I'm like, that's the one. Go back. And I'm like, man, that's crazy. I literally said I didn't want to use that, but that's what I need to use.
My dad sent me a video of me playing jazz band in high school. I was like, oh God, I don't want to look at it. But I did it anyway. And I was like, I can keep time.
Yeah, right.
I was in pocket.
That's what's up.
I was like the whole time.
Yeah.
My fills need a lot of work, but my time was good.
It's just, you think in that moment sometimes, kind of like when those moments where I'm like, oh my God, I played terribly. Right. But I'm just like, I guess I was doing all the things I'm supposed to be doing.
One of my favorite sayings, like when we think about ourselves, right, and like we can't be objective, And there's this saying that my partner Allison brought up to me one time. She was like, we can't read the label when we're in the jar.
Oh my God, that's a tattoo worthy.
Right?
That is crazy.
But that sticks with
That's a
like
good one.
It's and that's true. For good and bad. Like very much like we sometimes we fall into these bad habits or whatever. And it becomes a part of our system, and we just kind of goes through, and we just like we tolerate it. And then sometimes even when it's good, we don't know how good it is.
It's so true. Yeah, but I feel like I've been on this interesting path of a lot of learning, and one of those things is like if something happens that feels good, just be like, take that moment all the way in and be grateful for it, because it might come in handy later. And so, like, especially with the jar stuff and like feeling in this jar and like and then get to the end of a really tough process. I don't know. I can only think about being in my studio, because that's where I spend a very large amount of my days right now. I'm pretty much waking up, my partner's heading out, Susan's heading to work, and I'm like going to work there, and we do work together with photography things and that sort of thing, and branding and imaging. And so, but when we go to do our other work, it's like, oh man, she leaves and then I'm just in the studio, and I'm like, it's like this constant, like I'm in there, and like you said, I'm like in the mix so much, and like maybe hating it, maybe loving it, but also not really thinking about the outside very often. And so I've been really trying to get to a place of, if I don't like something or I'm getting stuck or frustrated, to just stop immediately. Just stop, save it, close it, and figure out something else different to do. And begin again. Yeah. And that has been, it took a minute to get to that part, but now I'm not trying to force inspiration, because I end up in a dark rabbit hole if I do that, Yeah. And so, and for being used to being so good at something like drumming, and just like that being so easy, and then like getting into some things that are a little bit more frustrating. Yeah. It's like, but it's taught me about the process, which is permanent. then it's not going anywhere. And so the better I've been able to get around the process, I kind of find myself now when I'm like drumming and reaching for a tone. I feel like when I'm producing, I'm like, it's becoming a different muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it's like the process. But I've tried to use drumming as like my center for how I even learn drumming and how, like, what it means and like how it is important. I mean, like the drums are always going to be the most important things on a track, period. I'm prepared to argue about it. But like taking that and that same feeling but applying it to every single thing else and saying like, yeah, the drums are important, but this is also important. And then, it's got to have its space. And like knowing so much about drumming and like percussiveness and like how I actually use this a lot when I'm producing, like with how like a hi-hat, if you could take a hi-hat away, even playing live, you can stop playing the hat and it could like the whole thing will be different.
This is like, so, one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you too, especially after I learned that you're like producing and everything. It's like every drummer orchestrates, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Yes.
this is like a job, or it's an art. It's
Mm-hmm.
not that old, or it's not that new, right? Like 100 years, but like you
Yeah.
consider like
Yeah.
all the other musicians you play with, like those, like people have been going to school for the violin and for the guitar for ages, right?
Right.
And drumming, like maybe 100 years.
It's so true.
And so, and so you're playing all these instruments at once,
Mm-hmm.
and considering how they interact with each other and how like the polyrhythms that can go on and the feel that you're
Yeah.
looking for, the tones,
Yeah.
all this stuff that's so like key, like it can be so responsive, right?
Yes.
And that's what I love about this concept that I kind of knew like gospel drumming was like
Yeah.
a whole other thing.
Oh yeah.
But if you look at how hard they hit, how
Yeah.
precise they are, and how important on their accents, because the message that they're trying to send is so important for the whole church program,
Oh yeah.
that it's like,
Dude, that's so
stakes are
true.
high.
The stakes are. You cannot back up a preacher and hit the wrong drum.
Right.
You will get a sharp look
It's a
in your
different weight.
direction.
There's a different weight to it than if
It's
you're just like playing
different.
at the bar, right?
Oh, for sure. It
Yeah.
is like knowing those tones, and then I think about a lot of like Indian hand drumming, which I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
a ton about, but I do know that the syllables are meaning
There's
different
a
tones,
sound. Yeah, there's a word for every sound of those drums.
and it is that's how I hear drumming. It's like
Yeah.
those tones, like the half of my battle of producing, I will say, 90% of it is the drums. And I find myself spending the most time on those than most other things. Because for me, like, and I'm like, again, with the learning process, learning like where they should be, but I'm such a drummer that I want the drums to hit you the hardest.
Yeah.
Even on the most simplest and purest of love songs, I want those drums to evoke the emotion of that song, if there are any. And so it's just like, it's so important to me to like be able to find that in a very elusive instrument, because you can put a little humidity in the room and some things are going to change. And I kind of forgot that until this week, and I went to play my snare and I was like, why does this sound like trash? And I was like, it's because it's the seasons. We're well into spring now and things have changed.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's crazy but one hit though, and it's like, yeah, that's not right. And that's how it, like, in the music, I'm like, I've gotten to where I can work past it now so that I don't lose my inspiration. It was very hard at first though.
Yeah.
Being so like hearing that so prevalent and not being able to move on until it was right. And then now I have to like get it in the ballpark and know those are not the drums. We know that. So let's focus in on but then come back to it with a vengeance, and intention.
That's what I'm so excited to see, or at least what I've discovered recently from myself, or like what I think is going on in the art world, in the music world, is that I've just caught on to so many drummers that are heading up their own bands now, right? Like not necessarily producing, but in some form or fashion, right?
Yeah.
So I got a chance to go see a forum that had like some big hitters, like I don't know, like Nate Smith and Kim Folk,
Yeah,
and then
love
Makai
that.
McCraven,
Oh, right.
and Antonio Sanchez, right?
Yes.
And so,
Love Antonio.
yeah,
Yeah.
incredible. Like
Yeah.
all those guys, incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And they, the way they talk about producing music and like, just
That's
making
cool.
the music and just very much like you're already saying, dude.
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember if it was Micaiah or no, I think it was Nate, but it's like, yeah, he wants to have that vocal there, but the drums are like
Right
right
there.
there.
That is
you
me.
know? And
Yeah.
I mean, and of course I'm biased, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I think I agree. Like it's amazing now to see where like drummers have been so much thought of as the person in the back.
Yeah.
And part of the appeal for me, I think
Yeah.
initially was like, yeah, I want to perform, but
Yeah.
I'm okay being back here.
Yeah.
Like y'all can be up front and I'll just lay back.
Yeah.
I get a seat. That's cool.
Uh-huh.
But now that, it's kind of changing.
It is
you know?
I had a moment. Well, it's like you said. There's so much of like the back, and that contributed to a lot of what I spoke about earlier. And feeling like, well, what happened is I started performing with a few different people, and I was doing a little bit, but mostly with played a little bit with Jonathan Scales, and his setup is very much a straight line. It's like the drums aren't in the back; they're on the side. He's in the middle, and the bass is on the other side of him. And doing that for me is beneficial for so many reasons. I could see everybody at the same time for one, and also I felt like it pulled me from back there because I've had so many people that tell me like, you played amazing, but you were in the dark the whole time, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. And I heard that so much that then it started pissing me off.
That you were in the dark.
In the dark,
like sonically.
No, like visually.
Yeah, you weren't seeing.
Like
that.
I want to see more of you. I heard that a lot, and then I got to the point when I was doing that, and then I was like, I'm gonna take this concept everywhere. So even when, for a minute, the band I was touring with, we would set up a little bit more flat, a little flatter to the audience, which is great, and especially when you're touring certain kind of venues. But yeah, it really kind of changed my perspective.
Who do you like to be next to if you're kind of more flat?
I like to hear the bass close, and it works best if there's a sub for sure too. Because sometimes being a little like further is good, but like too far is good. But like where I can like feel that and see that first, because I feel like it's something I like to watch bass player hands a lot, and so I like to watch everybody's hands honestly. But bass players, I can tell like where they might be going based on where their hand is headed. And so again, it's like sonic things. Then I kind of like will make certain choices based on where that's happening, and I can also see like their rhythm, how they're feeling it. And if they're not feeling what I'm putting down, then I might make an adjustment, or I might try to shift to where they are. Otherwise, it just is so messy.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool, man.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's good
we did
for
it.
now.
Yeah, cool. It's perfect. That was good. We did a lot.
Yeah,
I didn't know.